Thank you so much for being with us tonight as we begin our Parenting Roadmap classes again. And these are classes designed to look at a particular age group and to talk about how as a church we're committed to be walking alongside you as you are parenting your kids. At McDermott Road, we always want you to know that we love your family and we value your kids, and we want to do everything that we can to support you in the parenting process. And so for the next 3 weeks, we're going to be focusing specifically on building responsibility. And this class is geared towards ages 6 through 10. And we do have a booklet that is prepared for this particular material. If you go to theroadfm.org and you click on the Parenting Roadmap icon on the homepage, it'll take you to each one of these 10 particular topics. And if you'll click on Building Responsibility, there's where you'll find some of the material that we'll be going through over the next 3 weeks. We want to make sure these classes are something that are beneficial to you. And so throughout this time, if you have a particular question that you would like for us to dive into, we would love to do that. And so you can email questions to matt@ccmcdermott.org. And over the next 2 sessions, we will seek to begin answering some of your questions. And throughout this, we hope that you will be in prayer, that you'll be in prayer for your family, that you'll be in prayer for other families during this time. We know it's been a challenging season, and so we're hoping this time will be encouraging for each one of us. And so I'm blessed to be joined on stage by 2 special families, the Kinsfathers and the Strathers. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Mikey, do you mind introducing you guys?
Thanks, Matt. I am Mikey, Kinsfather, and this is my husband, Jared. We've been at McDermott Road for about 9 years. We have 2 children, Jackson, who's currently 10, and Macy, who's 8. So we are kind of right in the middle of this stage of life that we're going to be talking about tonight.
I'm Ruth Ann, and this is my husband, Steve Strother. Steve is one of the elders here. We helped with the church plant. So we've been here the entire time and raised our 3 children here. Our 3 kids are all over 30 now. So we've had experience in raising our children, and now we have 7 grandchildren, and several of them are in this age category. So we look forward to trying to share some of our experiences and look forward to seeing your children grow.
And one of the beautiful things about this is a live conversation. And so we are going to be interacting back and forth, and there's a little bit of a script, but not really. And so we're going to try to share some personal stories and have some really good back and forth about some of the things that you might be experiencing in this age group. And Mikey and Jaron, you guys are right in it. So maybe introduce us a little bit about this 6 through 10 age group.
One thing we've really come to appreciate about this age is that we kind of call it a sweet spot, where the kids are old enough that we're past diapers, we're past some of the more difficult young child pieces, but we're not to the point where they don't like us yet or they rebel too much. So we're really enjoying just having the time where we like them and they like us, and we can make a lot of memories together, play games together. It makes family activities just a joy at this point.
That's awesome. One of the things about it being a sweet spot is that you guys have a boy and a girl in this age group, and so they'll be able to add that perspective. And Steve and Ruth Ann also have had a boy and a girl go through this age group, and so we'll be able to talk about how this relates to boys and to girls, which will be a blessing of this time. And one commitment to these classes is we don't want to do life alone, right? We want to parent together. And Steve and Ruth Ann have some thoughts on how we can look for partners to parent our kids together.
One of the things that we really want to encourage you to do is to find other families to do life with. When we started McDermott Road, our children were 9, 11, and 13. And we found 6 or 7 families that we very intentionally did things together. One of the things we liked to do was to go out to dinner on Sunday nights. And so we would come up for service and have a family that we would go to dinner with. and sometimes 3 or 4 families. And it was very much of a family activity, so something that we did together. So look around, find families that are in your same life stage that you enjoy being with, and intentionally make some time to be together.
I think it's important for kids to be in the home of other Christians so that they can see the modeling of how a Christian family is. They're going to have their neighborhood friends that are going to have different homes and friends at school. And so I think if they see that there's a Christian environment in other homes and that there are rules to follow, I think it sets a good pattern for them.
And it also gives them role models that can be lifelong. We still have good associations with some of those very same families, and our children still go to them and have a great relationship with them.
Kind of one of the things about this time is we want to be intentional, and in this year where it's kind of tiring, and 2020 has been a lot. Sometimes intentionality is kind of thrown to the wayside because we're just trying to get by. But there are kind of 4 real times that we want to be intentional about, and those are meal times, bedtime, the time you have your kids in the car, and the morning time. Right? These are kind of all 4 opportunities that maybe we can be intentional during. Any thoughts on how to make the most of those particular settings?
Well, some advice we heard one time was to help your kids have a good bedtime so that the last thing that they have during the day is very positive. And so we do still tuck in our kids every night, pray with them, but also just try to leave them with something positive from the day. And I know Steve and Ruth Ann, your family has done that too and is continuing to with your grandkids.
Well, Allison asked for one good thing of her children. Tell us one good thing that happened today before they go to bed. So just find some little way to connect and look at the positive and how God's been used during the day.
And when we happen to be there, Jonah reminds me that, Pops, that's not something good for you. It's something good that I did today.
So when we think about, the time that maybe seems kind of mundane, the back and forth, and, how do you think about making the most of those times when you have your kids in the car, maybe when you're going from one place to another?
Our kids have just gotten old enough where they can ride in the front seat now. And one thing my son really enjoys is being the DJ. So if I let him control the radio, he really thinks he's got this great power. And so it's a small thing, but just a little bonding time there where he gets to choose what we listen to, and we can talk about some of the songs and talk about what he chooses, and just giving them that little bit of control. They really appreciate that.
I think coming home from church, if you ask your kids what did they learn in Bible class, kids are captive in the car and they will talk if you ask them questions. So we use that time to ask them about their Bible class. What did they learn? What did they learn in church? And just had some really good dialogue about spiritual things.
And one of the other things that we did, we very intentionally had music on the way to church that was always songs that we were trying to learn as a church family. And so we were singing on the way to church, which accomplished a couple of things. It got us ready to be at church, and it kept arguments from happening. So it was good both ways.
One of the reasons that we really wanted to drill in on these times is we do have biblical examples of some models for parenting, and one of the most prominent ones comes from Deuteronomy Chapter 6. And I'd like to read that real quick as we transition into a conversation that is around parental influence, because it may seem like sometimes we don't have all the influence we want, or things may not be going our way, but this encourages us to take advantages of the opportunities that we have. Deuteronomy 6, 4-9 reads, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and you shall talk to them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise. And you shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. And you shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. And maybe sometimes we would like to hearken back to that frontlet, right? To put the messages right between their eyes. But, that'd be kind of weird, I guess. But let's talk about parental influence. What are some things that are good, positive ways that we can influence our kids to grow into the type of adults that we want them to be?
I think that our kids really pick up on our priorities as a family by where we spend our time and the things that we try to be the most consistent with, whether it be doing studies at home or always being at Bible class and attending services and that sort of thing. And just the consistency of it really shows your kids a priority for those faith-building activities.
As we were talking, preparing for the class, just thinking back, if your child asks, "Are we going to church today?" I think that is a red flag. And the consistency part, whether it's attendance at church or reading your Bible, I don't know that I necessarily did a very good job with reading my Bible at home in front of the children. But if the child's questioning what you're going to do, then that may be a red flag for your family to think it over again about what do we do on a routine, regular basis, and are we missing something?
It's just similarly that every time we sit down to a meal, the kids expect there to be a prayer. It's not a question on that either. And it's the same thing at bedtime, that there's always going to be a prayer. And just it's a routine, but it's also just an expectation. It's the way they go through their day every day. And hopefully by doing that while they're at this age, it'll be something that's just part of their life as they get out of the home.
This also goes back to what we talked about a little bit earlier, too. If you're intentionally putting yourself around other families, then you can be reinforcing that with each other and have the opportunity for your kids to see that it's not just your family who does these things, but there are other families that are doing it as well.
One of the things that we kind of talked about in our conversation before this conversation was about how our kids have a high degree of trust during this period, and that's kind of a part of what makes this a sweet spot. But how do you take advantage of the opportunity that you have when your kids are looking to you for guidance during this stage?
It definitely goes both ways, that we try to just always expect them to be watching, to make the right choices, to do the right thing, and assume that some of that's going to be picked up by them. But at the same time, try to be intentional of when a learning opportunity arises, take a little extra time to tell them, share with them, this is why I made this decision, this is why I responded this way. And that the fact that they see you as really their most primary example will hopefully help them to take some of the lessons that you share and make it their own.
It's really important just to continually pray for our children, diligently pray for the right influences. There's so much evil in the world, and we're really able to protect them during that period of time, but they're just on the edge of being given more responsibility and more freedom. So this is a really important time to instill all those spiritual values in them.
We also have the opportunity to instill in them a prayerful attitude. So whenever life things happen, it's great to stop and pray as a family, to say, hey, this is happening with your cousin. Let's pray about it. Let's call and talk to your grandparents because they're going to have a surgery in a couple of days, and we'll pray with them. So take those opportunities when they're there and pray together, and make sure that they know that that's an important thing to you and that it's always a good thing to stop and pray.
One of the connections that we want to focus on about being an intentional parent is also being an introspective parent. And sometimes it can be really easily to, when we're in a public place or around other people, we can really pick out the flaws in other people's parenting, right? Or we can see the inconsistencies in others. But sometimes it's hard to see the inconsistencies in our own parenting approach. So maybe what are some ways to be a more introspective parent? What are some good questions that we can be reminding ourselves of? Maybe that's a part of parenting in community as well, some other people to kind of hold us accountable in that. But what are some thoughts about introspective parenting?
I feel like a big part of that is just keeping in mind that we're trying to raise more than just good people or good students or good athletes or good whatevers, but we're really trying to raise Christ followers and to prioritize discipleship in that way as just the overarching parenting guideline. It's a hard thing to remember, but I think that if we know that that's really the foundation when we're trying to make decisions about what to do, it can really help. Not that we do that correct all the time. I mean, no one can be consistent all the time, but consistency is something I'm always coming back to as being really effective with kids because it provides such structure and security and a feeling of safety and trust that we talked about.
Well, we talked about Mikey and Jaron. We did a marriage, what was it called?
Mentorship.
Marriage mentoring. And they were the younger couple with us. And so having someone, and Steve and I had couples like that in our lives that were 10 years or so older than us that had already gone through the experience of raising children. And we have found it was so beneficial having someone older that we could go to. Do you think we're handling this situation right? How did you do this with your children? I think that's very helpful.
And there may be some of those introspective questions that Matt was talking about that are very hard for us to answer. And we may need to ask somebody to give us a perspective. One of the things that we had talked about was who's in charge in your family? Is it the kids or is it the parents? And that may be a really difficult question to answer yourself, but probably not so hard for someone who's observing you to answer. We just have to be willing to hear the answer when it's given to us because it may be a difficult answer.
When we talk about being consistent, sometimes I at least get too stuck on the discipline side of things that we need to enforce the rules all the time and make sure they follow everything to the letter. But another good thing to do consistently is to give them praise and give them positive reinforcement. And that's when I try to keep it in the back of my mind. It falls by the wayside too often, but if I could just remember, compliment, think the good things, find something positive to say about their schoolwork, their just whatever they're working on, that the little compliments go a long ways for them to improve their self-esteem, try harder on the other things, and that's one thing that our kids really respond well to.
And one thing you and I, Steve, have talked about in the past is, maybe a way with the introspection is to look at your schedule, right? And this may be a little bit different time, but to open up and see how many things in your schedule are kid-related, and also how many things are time in which you're, taking care of yourself or in which you're investing in your own friendships and different things. And that parental self-care is something that's important for us to be doing while we dive in to supporting our kids. Anything about taking care of yourself as you seek to pour into your kids that you think is important to share?
Well, I know that the times that I overreact to my kids, and especially if we're talking about behavior and that sort of thing, is when I'm tired or I'm stressed. And I just being aware, being self-aware about that a little bit is sometimes helpful to realize, look, I'm frustrated, especially right now because I'm already tired, and now you've done this on top of that. And sometimes I found myself just talking through that with the kids so that they kind of know the bigger picture of why mom is getting so upset about something. But definitely, I think our state of mind as a parent really impacts how we react to our kids.
I think we need to take time to go to seminars or to go to a retreat, you know, and just get away from our children, but also to bond with people that are raising their children. And I think that we need to take advantage of those situations.
We also have to understand that sometimes it's decisions that we're making as a family that impact this too. This age range is where you're initially starting extracurricular activities and you're starting sports and you're starting those things. So especially husband and wife need to have a discussion of what's our feeling on this. You know, Ruth Ann and I made the decision early on that it was one sport at a time. And we really held on to that pretty strongly. So they weren't doing two sports and we were having to get them to practices for two different things that were going on at once. We said, okay, if you're going to do baseball, that means you're not going to do soccer. So those are decisions that you have to make together and that you want to make sure that you're on the same page together.
And so much of this topic about our influence does go back to how we teach obedience. And in our next session, we're going to be talking more about discipline and just the effects of that. But we just kind of wanted to introduce kind of the biblical principle of obedience and what we learn from being obedient, what we can teach our kids about obedience that will ultimately benefit them spiritually. But what do you think about the connection between obedience that happens in the home and then obedience as we seek to be followers of Christ? What lessons can we teach to our kids in that way?
It definitely starts at a young age on just setting some boundaries and being consistent. Something we've talked about a lot is don't threaten anything that you can't follow through with, that whenever we say there's going to be a consequence, we really need to follow through with that consequence if necessary so that they don't expect that we're going to give them empty threats and that they can really get away with anything. And I feel like at least with our kids, once they do the consequences of their actions and the boundaries with which they could operate, they pretty well behave most of the time. I mean, there's obviously the things that go wrong now and again, but just them knowing what we expect of them and what the consequences are, it really kind of helps keep them on the straight and narrow.
Some of those boundaries even included time frames that you set for your house. We had a very specific bedtime, and that was for them, and it was for us too. We needed time together as a couple. And so bedtime at this age was around 8 o'clock. And that was a little earlier than many of their peers, but it was good for them and it was good for us.
Of course, I think Brandon might have been hiding in the closet reading, but they'll find a way around it if they really aren't sleepy. But it is good to have time together as a couple, and the children are already in their beds.
I think for all of us, ultimately, you know, when we're talking about obedience with our children, we want them to be able to look at us as examples of being obedient as well. But that's also a little bit intimidating because if we say to our kids, follow us like we're following Jesus, we need to be mindful of that all the time, that we need to be making good choices that are the way Jesus would want us to be. And I think that's a great goal and a little intimidating, but it can also remind us that they need grace for their mistakes, just like we need grace for our mistakes too. So I think it's a goal that we want to keep searching and reaching for, but also acknowledging that they aren't going to be perfect in their obedience, just like we aren't perfect in ours.
That's a good point.
And so ultimately, part of the obedience process is it's kind of a gateway to building responsibility. And as we learn to respond to different things that we're given, it helps us grow in our responsibility. But we want to be doing that for the purpose of building character. And, we want our homes to be an environment for character formation. And so when we think about how to instill character in our kids, what are some kind of mindsets or frameworks that you found helpful for setting that tone in your home for character?
When I had a really small child and I was watching other kids play, I remember seeing a parent talk to her older child through a situation and say to him, "Are you using self-control right now?" And I thought, how awesome is that, to use the terminology of the fruit of the Spirit with kids? And I think that's a common language that we can have with our kids to talk about their behavior and that sort of thing. And I think hearing how their actions interact with those lofty goals of kindness and goodness and gentleness and self-control and faithfulness, and how are they responding in this situation compared to that goal. And I love the idea of using that language with kids just in their day-to-day activities. I'm really thankful for that mom in the playground who kind of showed that to me.
It's the what would Jesus do?
Yeah.
Give the child the opportunity to solve the situation just by asking those simple types of questions. It's good.
It also gives us an opportunity when something happens to show how you respond to that. We had an instance once with a baseball team when both boys were on the team, and they were like 7 and 6 and were playing, I'm pretty sure it was T-ball, and the game is over, and the last thing that happens is you go and you high-five everybody on the other team. And our team had lost that game, and they're doing the high-five, and I'm coming behind as the coach and realizing that the boys on the other team are having a funny look on their face and looking at their hands. And I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's going on? And we finally get our team back together, and I realize that all of my boys had spit in their hands and were then giving the high fives to the other boys. Well, okay, what do we do now? Well, as it turned out, we played this exact same team 3 days later. And so the first activity that we had as a team, we went over and stood in front of the other team and apologized for our actions. It really wasn't something that the boys wanted to do, but we held them accountable to that, and we did it. And they didn't repeat that in future games. So,
As far as we know.
as far as we never saw it.
One thing we found with our kids is how different their personalities are in terms of receiving discipline or corrective feedback. That with one, you can just give them a cross look and they're broken. You don't really even need to say anything. And the other, it's more important to explain a lot of detail about why this is the way it is and why we're going to do it this way. And you definitely will know that about your own kids. And another kind of tangent to that is just taking a breath. That after something happens, if you can breathe for just a minute before you respond, you're going to make a better response. And think about how to turn the disappointment into a learning opportunity, to show them kindness, show them direction rather than just snapping at them or saying the first thing that comes to mind. And that you have a lot more opportunities to help them grow there rather than to just inflict the discipline.
I'm glad you transitioned to that about teachable moments, right? There are times in which we can take a situation that maybe didn't go so well, or a situation that had the opportunity to go in two different directions, and by being conscious of making it a teaching moment, we can shift it in one way or another. But talking about looking for things to build character around age-appropriate things, what are some things that you think might be some good practices for this age group that could be a way to teach certain values in your home?
Well, I think you need to give them serving opportunities. You can take them to help at many, of course, during COVID, you can't do as much, but there are all kinds of organizations that can help us with our children and participate as families to serve, helping with the homeless or helping at a food bank. But we can provide those opportunities. But also, Steve and I noticed with our children that they all each had some unique personalities and unique gifts that we needed to foster. Our daughter just seemed to have a love for special needs children. As a very small child, she would climb up in a wheelchair of a cerebral palsy little girl at our church, and she just didn't have any fear. So we learned to foster that and help our families that had special needs children, and she still is just patient and kind, and that's a gift she has. So we need to see that in our kids and help them.
This is also a great age, I think. I've come to notice that you can really start adding some responsibilities at home. You know, since they were really little, our kids have taken their plate from the table to the sink, you know, after dinner and that sort of thing. But now they're getting old enough, they can actually put them in the dishwasher and help unload the dishwasher and put away their own laundry, and just increasing those responsibilities in addition to the opportunities that they have. And just some opportunities also for a little less parental oversight, you know, where they have a little bit of autonomy for some time. And that's been really interesting for us as we've kind of gotten into that, to see how they react when they get chances to make some more of their own decisions. So.
And one of the things about that is that there's going to be some things that we could let them help with, but we know that if we just do it ourselves, it'll get done a lot quicker, and we won't have to come back and do it twice maybe. But we need to not do that. We need to take the extra time, and we need to give them the opportunity to maybe not do it as well, so that we have the chance to work on it together and get better. The first time that your 10-year-old son mows the lawn, it's not going to be perfect, but that's okay. You'll be able to help them get better as they get experience doing it.
One thing that, you know, that is kind of unique about this season is, and I know all of you have experienced this partially during this season, but we've been working from home, right? And so sometimes the natural things that maybe let us decompress, the drive home, or different things that, you know, made parenting, maybe gave you a little bit of break. How do you look for maybe some of those breaks or some different things to be able to stay focused on being intentional with your kids?
So this fall, we had everyone at home with the kids doing virtual school. I worked from home. Mikey was at home most of the time, and it definitely did create a togetherness more than we ever had before. But for a lot of the fall, we had great weather. So we would go for walks, go for bike rides. The kids got rollerblades. They had great neighbors that we played with a lot. And just, it was constantly, we almost every night, it was some sort of activity that we would do together and have both just the entertainment of it, but also just the kind of the bonding time of getting to spend time with them. And they still ask to play games. I need to say yes more often. That's one of those things that soon enough they're not going to want to play games with me anymore. So I need to just relish this while we have it. But that we've really made the most of all of the time that we've had at home, where we couldn't go to movies, couldn't go to games or shows or anything else, and we've tried to just kind of get closer during this time.
One of the things that you can do is be creative about finding something that you as a parent can do with your child that's enjoyable for both of you. It was at this age range that myself and both boys started collecting baseball and football cards. And we did that together. It offered us a lot of opportunities. I really think both boys learned to read by working with baseball cards and looking at the backs. They certainly learned about looking things up and how to find out how much something is worth. And they enjoyed that very much. It gave us an opportunity for a positive reward. If they had an especially good week or made a good grade on something, they might get a pack of cards. This is something that would be something that you as a family will have to decide what you do, but it's been a great thing. And here, almost 30 years later, my oldest is still collecting and still enjoying it, and he's doing it with his 8-year-old son.
We kind of wanted to finish our time talking about decision making. This will be our last kind of block for this time together. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about was the virtue of giving your kids some choices. When you think about how to do that effectively, what comes to mind?
Well, kids definitely love getting to make their own choices. And we started when ours were really little, trying to give them opportunities to have choice. But I think we said before that when you present your children with choices, it's really important to make sure you're okay with whichever one they choose, if you're really going to let them choose. But not giving them something that's kind of outlandish that you really wouldn't want to deal with, but give them choices that you're really okay with either option. And not too many choices. We have one child who cannot decide between anything. He just, I gave it away. It takes a long time to decide anything. So he gets different choices than our daughter, who is extremely decisive, and we'll tell you in just a moment. So even things as small as letting them choose a Christmas gift for each other at Five Below, where you can go in the store and pick out anything at Five Below as a Christmas gift for your sibling. Well, for one of our kids, that took about 2 minutes, and the other one we had to set a time limit on. So there were choices, but within limits.
It also reminded me, a book we read really when the kids were super young was Love and Logic, where it's about making the choices and letting them feel some sense of control in these decision makings. And by both of us reading that, it gave us a common vocabulary and a good way to talk to each other about what we were doing and how we were intentionally doing it. And I know there are dozens, hundreds of books like that will help you in this. And I think the key thing is that if both parents read it, they will much more likely be on the same page, and the kids will see the common approach that's being taken. And that kind of goes back to just the normalcy, the kind of firm approach that the kids are used to from both parents.
Well, we want to thank you so much for being with us tonight, and we will be together again next week to discuss how we, discipline our kids will kind of be the main crux of that discussion, and we hope that that you'll be with us for that. We would love for you to send in whatever questions that you have. You can send those to matt@ccmcdermott.org, and we'll begin trying to answer those questions the best that we can. But we want to thank you so much for being with us. I want to encourage you to spend some time talking to each other about some of the things that were brought up tonight, and spend some time praying for your kids. And just know, as a church, we want to be there with you and partnering with you in any way that we can. So thank you so much for joining us tonight.